ॐ पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणीम्। नमोऽस्तु ते व्यासविशालबुद्धे फुल्लारविन्दायतपत्रनेत्र येन त्वया भारततैलपूर्णः प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमयप्रदीपः प्रपन्नपारिजाताय स्तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। A very simple summary of what Sri Krishna has been talking about in the verses that we saw so far is that we make the bondage. What we do can be undone also by us. In this celebrated portion of Sthita Prajna Lakshanas, there is a description of how our psychological bondage gets created, how we get worldly, many a time without our knowing at all what is happening within us. It is like how if a newcomer sees these parking lots at some places where there are many levels. It happened to me years ago. The newcomer feels the car is going round and round in circles. And then he realizes that it has gone to a lower level at certain places, or at certain other places the car has gone to a higher level. When it is large, when it is huge, the visitor feels, what is this? We are going round. As you and I live our life, as we deal with situations, we get involved in relationships with people, with objects and so on. Without our knowing, we would have got more enmeshed in attachments, and at other times, without our clearly recognizing, we might come out of many an attachment too. That is where we are all trying to take help from scriptures like the Bhagavad Gita, somewhere else, maybe some other wise literature, which, as I said in the very first evening, acts like a mirror to us. We otherwise tend to think about 100 other things in life. These books give us a certain aid or help in looking at ourselves. We also went into this issue the other day. Many a time, a satsang like this, more than giving us some conclusions, raises certain good questions. If you and I seize those questions and really pursue them, certain understanding develops. So I once more say, there is a doing and then there is an undoing of bondage. By bondage we mean this psychological mess as well as mesh. We get trapped, or maybe in these days of internet, I should say psychological net. We are all caught in the net of our own equations, our own values in relationships. What I mean is, things that need not disturb us do disturb us, when inside us we have been confused. Things that need not attract us very strongly pull us towards them. Things that need not, objectively speaking, scientifically speaking, or whatever, left to themselves, they don't do anything to us. But given our value system, our fancies, given our certain conditioning, these things may provoke great reactions in us. They are called raga and dvesha. So what is bondage that we are talking about? More and more raga and dvesha, maybe in greater variety and maybe in greater strength. That, like we have always had, let us say, attachment to money or so-called good looks of people or some other externalities, and they could get stronger. So raga, the attraction, the pull gets stronger. Or we could get new attachments. Likewise, we might have had some prejudice against a single person or a community, a group, and it could get stronger. And we could get certain negative opinion newly about some people, some community, and so on. In the two verses we read yesterday, towards the end, Sri Krishna has made a very interesting comment that it all happens because of continued or sustained thinking processes. It is like you borrow a book from a library with the 15 days or 1 month time given to you. Then, at the end of those 15 days, you return it. Now there is an option, you renew. Nowadays, of course, technology has advanced. Much of it happens sitting at home. The book also need not be hard copy. From home only, you download an e-version. But there are also similar, booking, reserving, blocking, renewing, etc. are possible. So I am focusing on renewal. You renew after 15 days. And after another 15 days, you again renew. Otherwise the book would go back. In like manner, we have a certain opinion, we have a certain fancy, and we might reinforce it, renew it, subscribe again to it, and consciously or not so consciously strengthen it. So when he said, Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsaha, verse 62, when a man, or a woman for that matter, goes on thinking over certain pleasure prospect, he imagines, I will be so happy if I get that object. I will be so happy if I get to enjoy that object. I will be really, much envied by everybody if I get that position. So, see what thought is doing to us when we indulge in these thoughts. This is easier said than handled, I do agree, for all of you would have a question. Does it mean that we should go about daily life thoughtlessly? Never fancy a position, never even think about a possible promotion, never imagine possible new friendships. Isn't it natural that when we meet a nice person, we think, hey, he was so nice, I would like to meet him again and forge a good relationship. This is the kind of people I would like to have in my circle of friends. This kind of thinking, isn't it required? That is intelligence. Is Gita asking us not to have any thoughts about any object, any person? You meet somebody in a social get-together and that person may be very pleasant, impresses you, But because you have read second chapter of Gita, you say Rama Rama or Shiva Shiva. I am not going to think about this person. I already have enough attachments. I don't want new attachments. Is it what Gita is saying? Certainly not. Gita is not asking us to become some kind of stone-like people. Gita is certainly not asking us to become indifferent. In fact, great seers have said, in the name of detachment, many people turn indifferent. In the name of, I am getting out of my attachments, if a man becomes less sensitive to the needs of his wife or children and so on, indifferent, then that is no spiritual learning. Now we say that Gita is not saying it. However, ask yourself, be true to yourself, be honest to yourself. You will find that when thought indulges in various possibilities and prospects for one or two genuine, sensible, intelligent options that thought is considering, there are always equal number, if not more, utterly insensible, nonsensical, fanciful, exaggerated forms of indulgence. All that Bhagavad Gita asks is, can you please have a greater self-awareness where you don't do those nonsensical things, where you don't fail to learn lessons from past experiences, where earlier, let us say, merely by looks or merely by somebody's language, because she or he spoke good English or Spanish or Hindi or some language, you got impressed and then realized that language doesn't mean everything. Somebody could speak beautifully but might not deliver goods later in the job for which you might, let us say, hire him or her. But you got so impressed by merely the language. You got so impressed by maybe the name of the institute where he studied. There are 100 things which impress us, and then there are what is called essential. Like in the context of an interview or hiring, you need to check whether the person has competence. He may be from a reputed institute, but he may not have competence. Ask him a few questions, check out properly. In the same way, she or he may have wonderful language, but you are hiring for maybe some technical area, for some finance area, and it's not about giving a speech. This applies even to the so-called spiritual activities. Do not go by mere language of a speaker like me. Examine very carefully whether there are contradictions, and if you get a chance, go after me and see my personal life. You never know how the person is on the platform and down the platform. Generally we run away from a place within a week. We don't stay in any place for long. As people get impressed and get near us, we say, I have another program in Los Angeles, I'm leaving tomorrow. Anyway, that is for humor. It's neither suspecting or doubting everybody, but nor should you be foolish to be simply carried away by appearances. Therefore, what Sri Krishna is saying here in using the word Vishaya Dhyana is those thought processes where really intelligence is lacking. And it's a vicious circle. Because you had some vasanas before, it's very difficult for you to control those vasanas. Even as a part of your mind is saying, hey, this is not going to work, you are once more being very foolish. You are once more getting carried away by some glitter and glamour. Check out what is really needed in any prospect, job, relationship, a change of place, and so on and so forth. Part of your mind is saying, but that is where we use the word vasana once more. If somebody has strong vasanas, then it is as though there is a magnetic pull because of those one's own hidden tendencies, and therefore one has to be very careful and self-awareness, watching, if need be, check with a few friends, consult people. Do not take decisions all on your own. So these are qualities of intelligent living. This boils down to intelligent living. All that Sri Krishna says is, live intelligently, do not get carried away by certain habitual, mechanical thought processes. Vishayadhyana, therefore, is more mechanical here by force of context. Then your own thoughts have a way of making you believe what, in a foolish way you wanted to believe. You become more and more, yes, it is true. This is going to make me very, very happy. And this fame, this name will give me happiness. The truth is, mere social image, fame and name doesn't give us happiness. We get drawn to them. So Preeti or Sangha is an increased pull towards these tempting objects, positions, pleasures, whatever. And then that takes the form of desire, kama. Sangat sanjayate kamaha. What's the difference between Sangha, that is Preeti, a certain attraction, certain extra amount of being drawn to something, and then desire, kama. Kama is an explicit thought form where your mind is saying, I want it. There is no second opinion. Earlier you said, this is very attractive. Oh, I like this. It is so nice. Like when you go to a mall, you stop at some object and just stand there. Maybe you have gone with your family and the family members are pulling you. Come, we have to go to the other section. You say, wait, let me see this a little more. So there is an attraction. And then desire is, I want to buy this. I want to have this. Kamaha. And as it gets very strong, if it is fulfilled, you enjoy the pleasures. Quite likely, in this magical game that the mind is playing, you get more and more habituated. And if it doesn't get fulfilled, there may be disappointment. Please see, all these are things that happen in our own thought domain, while somebody else is not even aware what is happening inside you. Only you know what is happening. Many a time you find, most of you are parents, some grandparents too. You are looking at your son or daughter in a certain way. You are concerned with maybe his studies or her career. Meanwhile, this boy or this girl might be attracted to something in relationships or some other plans, and what he or she is looking at in the internet also you do not know. We are not pulling the leg of the younger generation. When we were younger generation, we too did the same. Parents thought of us in some way, and we were in our own world. It happens. History repeats. Long back I heard a joke. A certain elderly man came once to the city where he had gone to college years ago, 25, 30 years ago. He was very eager to see his college, and he was very eager to even see his dormitory, hostel rooms, because he wanted to see, this is the room where I stayed. And he went there and knocked, the door would not open, whatever room number, 113 something. He knocked again and again, then a boy opened, and the man went in. The boy was a bit embarrassed. How come this man is rushing in like this? But the elderly man spoke very lovingly to the young fellow. I want to see this room. 25 years ago, I was in this room. The boy was a bit embarrassed because there were certain pictures on the walls which he did not want elderly people to see. The boy said, these pictures I didn't put, I have a roommate, he put all this. And the elderly man said, those days I also used to say the same. And then there was something on the table. About that also the boy said, this again is the roommates. Some visitor put it, something like that. We used to say the similar things. And in this joke, bear with me, it goes a bit far. From one of the wardrobes, finally when he opened, there was a girl standing there. Shiva Shiva. Then the elderly man, maybe he had gone through Sita Prajna Lakshanas, unmoved. He just saw and said, oh, my daughter, what's your name? Are you his classmate? And she came out. And this boy said something. No, she is actually a cousin visiting from somewhere. This is exactly we used to say. So like that the joke goes. What I mean is, because there are some younger people also here, please let them not imagine that this Swami seems to be having extra sympathy with the parents' generation and grandparents' generation. No. I am talking, if at all there is sympathy for all humanity, including myself. I have all the problems discussed in Bhagavad Gita. So we are doing some loud thinking, trying to understand ourselves. So the thought processes hijack us, and when our desire is obstructed, Sri Krishna says, Krodha abhijayate. Anger rises, and anger leads to sammoha. Moha itself means all our values going topsy-turvy. Moha is when we do not know that we are making erroneous choices. We do not realize at all, and when somebody points out we don't like it, then people sometimes right in front of us or behind us say, it's very difficult to advise her. She is in her own world. And if we speak the truth, she doesn't like it. If we begin to advise, he mistakes it. He's not taking in the right spirit. These are the comments that people come out with when you and I are in moha. Sammoha is samyak moha. Some stands for, in Sanskrit, in many words, in the case of many words, certain strong, like sara itself means movement. Samsara is endless movement. Within one life, or as we believe in Hinduism, from life to life. Punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam, punarapi janani jatare shayanam. That is sansara. Sara, sarati is movement. Sarati, sara, sriti. Then sansara, and sansriti. A person who is constantly moving from one trouble to another, one self-created complication to another, is called samsari. Once we asked Swami Chinmayanandaji, who is a sansari? He said, samyak sorry. A person who time and again becomes sorrowful at everything that goes against his wishes. Because one is so dependent, slavishly dependent upon one's wishes being fulfilled. Things should happen the way I want. If we become so dependent on such desires, then when things do not happen the way we want, we become very sorry. Samyak sorry. Sansari. That of course was a humorous new meaning that Chinmayanandaji gave. Sammoha. So great delusion. Sammoha smriti vibhramaha. People forget all that they had learnt before. They had not only learned, they had advised others too, let us say. They were such learned people, scholars, but they make mistakes. And at this place, Adi Shankara has a comment, when we forget what we had studied, then gurum api akroshati, he says a line, towards one's teachers, which means towards elders, parents, etc., one starts yelling and screaming, which is so unthinkable otherwise if one had been in one's senses. One becomes so out of control in oneself, smriti bhramshat, as we forget basic principles of right conduct, right behavior, right way of relating with people, then the result is buddhi nasha. Buddhi, that is our intellect, that is the storehouse of our values, our judgments, the storehouse of our learning. We have learnt a lot and we have understood a lot, but it seems in this kind of self-destruction, a state comes about where all that learning is not available at all. When buddhi is gone, the shloka says, buddhi nashat pranashyati. It is not physical death, and nor is it the concept of eternal damnation. In certain religious schools, there is a notion that somebody goes to hell not just for a limited period of time, he is damned forever. In the Gita, there is no concept of eternal damnation. On the contrary, the Gita says, do what you may, you are the indestructible self. So some people even misuse it. It's all right, Our philosophy says, I am the, what is that word? Avinashi Atma. But at what price? How much do you want to suffer? There is no second opinion on that. The Vedantas stand towards what could happen to somebody in the worst case is that even in the worst case, you don't get destroyed forever. You will go to a very, very despicable, highly pitiable condition, but it is not forever. You will come out. You will come back. That's a very positive message really. You are, as per the Upanishads, you are that intelligence, you are essentially that spiritual principle which has unbelievable potential. Most degraded you may be out of external or internal causes, but you have the capacity to again, like the phoenix rising again from the fire, you can come out. Therefore, Vivekananda used to quote in India, and when he came to US in several of his lectures, he would quote some line from some Upanishad where the teacher addresses the students, Amritasya putraha, O children of immortality. Amritasya putraha, you are all children of immortality, every one of you, learned as well as the illiterate. That kind of spirit is certainly the flavor of the Upanishadic teachings, but at the same time, that is not a license given to us. You are Amrita Putra, so do whatever you want. I am telling you, you are Avinashi Atma, nothing can happen to you. No, as this line says, Buddhi Nashat Pranashyati. Pranashyati means when there is no buddhi, one is as good as utterly ruined, utterly destroyed. For mainly, it is as simple as this. All of us want happiness. We want peace. We want love. We want to be loved. Also, we want to love. It's a very basic need of human life. Generally, we think these are our needs. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is often quoted. Material needs, emotional needs. But deep inside us, we want self-actualization. We want a sense of, I am all right. We may have a lot of wealth and the society may envy us. We may have a very good social image. But internally, suppose there is a nagging thought in us that I am not all right, then that's quite a misery. That's quite terrible. And when we say nashtaha or pranashyati, what is meant is the person suffers then from a whole lot of inner conflict, contradiction, low self-esteem and other forms of confusion, which is not at all desirable. So this is, as we said yesterday, called by some commentators as the ladder of fall. This is how, all beginning with thought. So one more summary of this is, don't underestimate your own thought. When thought processes go on, don't say, I'm feeling good about this thought. Maybe pleasurable, or maybe, thoughts of some kind of hatred. Sometimes we dramatize, we visualize, either we ourselves doing something harmful to somebody, or we visualize such and such thing will happen to him, that's very good, he deserves it. Some kind of, we visualize it and we may draw a certain pleasure. Watch out. As per these verses, whenever we indulge in certain thought processes which are unhealthy, which are away from fact, which are away from reality, which our own conscience whispers to us, hey, this is not good. Maybe that man deserves certain punishment. But if you indulge in thoughts, I would like to see him behind bars, I would like to see him being, kicked around by everybody, like that, some violent thoughts. Or in terms of enjoyment too, when we visualize various kinds of enjoyment. It is as simple as this. We then create, I would use now the language of Sri Ramana Maharshi, who used this expression, I-thought, I thought. I thought is a thought describing oneself. More we indulge in unhealthy thoughts, we create a powerful I thought, a self-description, and then the tragedy is that self-description becomes stronger than who really we are. Our thoughts practically make us something else, while actually we are not that. I have been hating somebody, now suddenly that man may die in an accident and is gone. His story is over. But since I have indulged in negative thoughts about him for a length of time, months or a couple of years, with that accident my thought energy would not suddenly subside. Time and again I would find myself as a person who hates. Now I'll hate his memory. I'll hate his very, picture. He is gone. But here remains all that junk, all that which you should trash away. But you cannot trash it. How we wish we could just, collect all the negative thoughts in us and like you do in computers, trash it. Send it to the recycle bin. Yesterday I was driving to the lecture. In the car I saw the GPS, how the roads, North Main Street, etc., all roads, and I made a comment to my friends, how we wish science had brought out an instrument where we could see like this our thoughts, anger, jealousy, and great details. A few years ago this was unthinkable, this GPS. Today we are able to see so clearly. And the machine shows nearest there's a library, there's a coffee shop, there is some hospital. All that is shown there. How we wish, but alas, no instrument will be available even for years to come, for all time to come. But the message of hope is, you can have something equivalent to that instrument by just slow down, be more self-aware. For lot of movement outwards that you do with your mind, here and there, suspend your activities, try to see, let's say, some natural beauty, try to see a tree, try to see some clouds passing by the sky, or just listen to some instrumental music. Your outgoing mind would say, I have so many things to do, who is going to hear this? All of us, collect lot of nice things, but very few listen really. But I'm putting it as a spiritual exercise with soft instrumental music, or just with some natural surroundings, or as one more last example may be given, observing our own breathing, breath observation. Using breath observation as an exercise, you can get a certain handle on your thought processes. Otherwise, thought processes, slip from between your fingers. You don't know where you are. Before you realize what has happened, some tremendous worry, tremendous fear, great regret, great, some kind of fancy has risen, has got built, and as though has hijacked you, and you get exhausted. Imagine somebody sitting in a nice air-conditioned room but sweating profusely. And then you wonder what's happening to you. Thoughts. If one is having thoughts of great fear, then one can sweat in an air-conditioned room also. What's the use of that outer AC? There is so much of panic. I'll not elaborate too much now on this, but quickly I may mention there is a popular book by Dean Ornish. Dean Ornish program for reversal of heart disease. Presently I myself am studying it. I bought it because I got a copy for my own possession, because it's called a program by a physician who is in your own area, San Francisco or somewhere. It's a program for reversal of heart ailment. Of course that also we are concerned with. But 2/3 of that book I noticed is about meditation, is about right living, is about right diet, is about right attitudes. It's a very spiritual book. And that is what is going to be mentioned now by Sri Krishna in a very, very concise way. I would call the next verse, in fact I go once more by Adi Shankara, can you believe, introducing the next shloka, while the two shlokas we covered were about how we get more and more messed up. The next shloka is how you may come out of all this bondage. He says, Atha idanim moksha karanam uchyate. The way to liberation will be said now. So that is where, as Dinesh Burman also introduced, today we are going to touch on the message of hope. Moksha karanam. Let's see what deserved such a compliment by the Advaita commentator, calling next verse, Moksha karanam idam uchyate. Ragadvesha viyuktaistu Vishaya indriyaischaran Atmavashyair vidheyatma Prasadammadhigacchati Ragadvesha viyuktaistu Vishayan indriyaischaran Prasadammadhigacchati Prasade sarva dukkhanam Hanirasyopajayate Prasanna chetaso hyashu Buddhi paryavatishtate Prasade sarva dukkhanam Hanirasyopajayate. These two verses use the word prasada. Prasada, most of us know the word prasada in the context of we go to a temple or we attend a puja, we get something to eat at the end, prasada. Of course, that also is a valid meaning, but otherwise, here especially, prasada is same as what most of us know as prasannata, a serene state of mind. Serenity. Prasada, prasannata is cheerfulness. The earlier two verses described how we could drive ourselves to endless agitations, inner discontent. The earlier verses which we said described psychological bondage were painting a picture of a man or a woman getting into so much of inner conflict. In contrast, here is the description of inner freedom. Maybe we have a lot, money or power or position, maybe we do not. Irrespective of that, the inner mental climate can be one of cheer. We could be cheerful, we could be at peace and striving to do what is possible, what best is possible at a given moment of time. Let me once more clarify, nowhere in these teachings the idea of some kind of indifference or insensitivity to what has happened to us is implied. Suppose you fail and you somehow quieten your mind, somehow you just say, I don't want to think about it, and out of that kind of forcing the mind to become quiet, either using external aid like some drugs or some escape, some drink or a cigarette, or turn the television on and I don't want to think about my failure. Or some people are able to simply through willpower still the mind. Vedanta is not the science of stilling the mind. In fact, in pure Vedanta, stilling the mind is rather made fun of. By stilling the mind, you only put your problem into the back seat. Or as the English idiom goes, you sweep the dust under the carpet. You have not really removed the dust. You swept the dust under the carpet. Stilling the mind has at best a certain limited value. And this prasada, let me clarify here, is not about stilling the mind. It is about intelligently being free of false notions, false values, false perceptions. I have been emphasizing right seeing, for which the Sanskrit words or single compound word is samyak darshana. In right seeing, this is the assurance of the Upanishadic, or I don't mean merely Upanishadic, Sufi teachings, Zen teachings. In the world there have been many great systems of teachings, and in their own ways they have guided humanity. They have pointed to the possibility of our being fully alert. See, by stilling the mind, what I meant was, you make the mind inalert or not alert. The mind is not perceiving at all. I don't want to see. Like you see your own son in hospital, let us say. He met with an accident and he is having a leg at 45-degree angle. It's very difficult to see. Now you see for a moment and you run away from there. And I don't want to go there again. Well, thereby you may save yourself from some agitation for a while. But how long can you do that? Especially you are the father, you are required now to arrange. So running away from responsibility, running away from unpleasant scenes, or just trying to escape from an uncomfortable or unpleasant scenario in our life is not going to help us. At best it may give a temporary relief. If you think you cannot manage, all right, take a break, but then come back. Now the Vedanta's pointer is to seeing rightly, putting it in the bigger picture, and not just repeating some sentences, oh, sorrow is inevitable, not just some bookish knowledge. Is it possible for you to really face those sorrowful thoughts that come to you and not get carried away? The verse here uses the word prasada. In 64 as well as 65, you have the word prasada. 64 ends with the word prasadam adhigacchati. 65 begins with the word prasade. In this state of true serenity that you come upon through intelligence, not by suppression, not by stilling the mind, by a certain rise of intelligence in you, That is the prasada. The second verse says that in fact heralds ending of all sorrow. In your own San Francisco Bay Area, there was this teacher Eknath Ishwaran who taught English in Berkeley, and later he moved over to a place little north of San Francisco, Petaluma. As many of you are familiar with him and his books, he wrote 3 volumes of commentary on Bhagavad Gita. I wish to quickly mention in relation to this that the first volume by him on Gita, where he covers the first 6 chapters, is titled Ending of Sorrow. And what inspired him to take 6 chapters and then scan the verses and think of what is the message here, and then he chose these 2 verses, especially the latter, 65, Prasade Sarva Dukkhanam Hanihi. Sarva Dukkhanam Hanihi means ending of all sorrow. Ending of all sorrow. This is in fact the purpose of true spirituality. True spirituality, we must all know very clearly, is not at all about some supernatural powers. Reading somebody else's mind as though our mind is not enough to trouble us. Walking on water or flying in the air or some other, or speaking eloquently or writing some, poetry or some mystical lines which become well acclaimed in the world. No, they are all utterly meaningless when you think about the true spirituality. So in a passing manner, if I may mention, when J. Krishnamurti in 1929 gave a very wonderful speech and he took a different direction, he said a statement, my only aim is to set man unconditionally free. This prasada here goes well with that kind of spirit. Can we be unconditionally free? To set man unconditionally free. And I am not interested in all other paraphernalia he meant. He meant I am not interested in setting up one more hierarchy, one more school of philosophy, one more system of concepts and all that. That statement has a lot of significance. So let's take a look at this, how Sri Krishna talks about ending of sorrow, prasade dukkhanam hanihi, and calling it prasada serenity. I find this verse, after my own many years of wandering through a lot of literature here and there, I am somebody, incidentally, who get easily impressed by anybody and everybody. That is both my strength and weakness. You give me maybe not all books, but a wide range of teachers' books, wide range of philosophers impress me. So I was impressed by, when I lived here in the 90s, very much impressed by that management guru, Stephen Covey, for example. In every lecture on Gita or Viveka Chudamani, I would quote Stephen Covey. Then finally, the engineers in the audience became very sympathetic to me. In 97 or so, just before I left this country, Stephen Covey was in San Francisco for some conference, and some HP engineers said, "You want to meet him?" I said, "Yes, I would love to." They took me. I had a chance to see him, have a discussion with him for 20 minutes. He gave me a book with his own signature and all that, that memory I cherish. So Stephen Covey, Eknath Ishwaran, so Vimala Thakar, so large number of people. So some people appreciated this. Chidananda is open to a lot of teachers, but some others were very unhappy. He is so unstable. He should stick to Shankara, or he should stick to just Ramana. So I don't want to go more autobiographical. We all have our nature. We got to be true to our nature. Finally, of course, I have found Maharshi Ramana and insights of J. Krishnamurti very, very helpful in my personal journey. When I was practicing Maharshi Ramana's Who Am I inquiry, I felt I was hitting a wall. Who am I? Who am I? After a while I found, what am I doing? Is it becoming a japa? But who am I is not a japa, it's not a mantra like Om Namah Shivaya. It's supposed to be an inquiry. And in order to inquire, you need a little more light to see something. This ego, this self, this limited I, my pride, my hurt, or whatever conflict I am going through. It needs to be seen a bit more clearly, and I was not able to see more. That's where Krishnamurti's teachings were very helpful to me, and certain statements really shake you up. J. Krishnamurti can shake you. I will not go much into his teachings here. In a way, they are coming indirectly in whatever I am speaking. So, okay. I said this verse, after all these years, to me, comes out with a totally new meaning. What is it? Long ago it meant, don't have likes and dislikes. Raga, dvesha, viyuktai. Let your senses, eyes, ears, nose, all that, engage with sense objects. Eat gulab jamun if you like, but watch out. Let your senses not have an undue attachment to that pleasure. Or somewhere else you are doing something in uncomfortable circumstances. Train your senses and the mind not to have unnecessary complaints. Have some kind of sahana, tolerance, titiksha, bearing with discomfort. This is what it meant to me in olden days. But as I have pondered more, today this verse means much more. It's a really beautiful verse. Seeing things as they are is the meaning that I would share with you this evening. Because raga and dvesha both are like coloring agents. I meet you, I ask your name, and you say, my name is Saxena. Suppose immediately my mind goes, I know Saxenas. They are of that kind. That is past coming in, clouding. Somebody says, I am Varma. Somebody says, I am Sharma. Somebody says, I am Singh. I believe in a Florida school, second grade children were together. And this really happened. A girl asked her classmate, what's your name? And then the other girl gave the name. You are also Khan. I am also Mohammedan. Like that, the dialogue proceeded. Then the other girl said, no, I am not Mohammedan. I am not Khan. But your name shows Khan, the way you wrote. Then this girl said, no, I am Priyanka Ramlakhan. And immediately that other girl, you are not Mohammedan. You are an idol worshipper? Say another comment. Now, as Krishnamurti would use this way of conveying, I am borrowing from him in style. You and I are those two girls. You and I, we may be in 40s, 50s, 60s or 70s. We are not much different from those two girls who at just the name Khan, one moment got excited, then it is not Khan, it is Lakhan, Ram Lakhan. What a disappointment. This is called Raga Dvesha. We have got some notions. It may be name, it may be community, it may be caste, creed, or achievements, or it may be some reflected glory. I meet somebody and he is part of a very well-known company which is in news. That company is doing so well, stocks are going up like anything. You work for that company? Suppose I get excited. Then I am not seeing the person as he is. I am not seeing the person as she is. So looks and position and power and a lot of... It's a tremendous challenge to meet each other without interference of the past knowledge. I might have met 20 Sharmas, but this Sharma whom I am meeting today need not be like those 20. But thought says, the thought is memory. Thought is all this collection, this accumulation. Why talk of others? About ourselves too. We become so judgmental, right? Seeing not only others, seeing ourselves. To see ourselves as we are is very difficult. Sometimes you and I getting into this so-called religion become more miserable Earlier, we would have got up late and not bothered. But after reading some literature, we get up late, then we become judgmental. My God, I don't even have the willpower to get up early. I have gone through all this in the olden days quite a lot. I am not totally free from it now. Suddenly the mind reacts. If I am not even able to get up early, I think I should stop giving all these lectures. And do what? Go to Himalayas. Run away. That will help. Here at least you are getting up at 7. In Himalayas, in some distant cottage, you will get up at 9. Nobody. Here at least somebody would. Anyway, I need not elaborate this. At the end of my lectures, you will be very sympathetic to me. Okay. Anyway, I am saying seeing oneself as one is. See, take this example. You and I, let us say, one day got up late. To say, I am a lazy person is actually very questionable. I may not be lazy at all. I may be getting up late because last evening, last night, I talked too much to people and there is a certain mental strain. Sometimes physically also we would have slept late. Sometimes physically we have gone to bed early, but think of your last evening or last 2-3 days. They have been very stressful. People differed from you in opinion. In some meetings you find that you said something, everybody disagreed and it hurt your pride. And that is how, not out of laziness. You feel like, I am tired. Psychological strain. Therefore, it is a matter of how you live. And how you live, do you live in certain maturity, or you get easily hurt by somebody differing from you, somebody criticizing you? That is a different matter than the so-called laziness. So, seeing oneself as one is requires tremendous gentleness. I am in no way implying that now do whatever you like and never judge yourself. Not licentiousness. We tend to go in that direction, go from one extreme to another extreme. At one point we are too self-judgmental. On small things we think we are great, or on small things we condemn ourselves. That is judgmentalism. And the other extreme could be, I am not going to judge myself anymore. Khao, pivo, mauj udao. Eat, drink, make merry. Sometimes when people thank me at the end of a lecture, thank you Swamiji, I become suspicious. What message did they get from me? Did they understand something, or did they get some kind of endorsement for whatever they are doing? I am not sure. Anyway, it is a serious topic here. Ragadvesha viyuktaistu. As you see people, as you hear something, as you touch something, as you taste something, this is called indriya vyavahara. Can you ensure, is it possible for you, Sri Krishna seems to be asking us, is it possible for you to be free of any prejudice, any bias, any form of past casting its shadow on the present perception? That is right seeing again. Very easy to talk about it, but in fact, as I went up this stage today, a thought came to my mind. Am I seeing all these people like regular human beings, or because Bay Area has its own charm, right? San Francisco Bay Area has its own charm. Silicon Valley has its own charm. So I started questioning myself. Or do I have a certain special, regard or special attraction to this? San Francisco Bay Area people, I better speak extra carefully. That would be again slipping from seeing people as they are. You have your strengths and you have your limitations. You are all, I guess, human beings like anywhere else. Primarily, all of us are human beings, and to see each other, as human beings, mind you, one last comment on this verse, seeing one as one is, that this is not turning blind to factual things about him or her. It is being free from fanciful things. Suppose you have fever. It's a fact, let us say. You have got 100-degree temperature and still you manage to come to my lecture, hoping some miracle might take place. Or what? Sorry. So, if I say, oh no, I want to see you as you are. This fever is, I don't want to see it. What do you mean? Touch his neck, it's so hot. So, there are factual things about each other. And seeing somebody as they are, or seeing oneself as one is, requires accepting facts, but staying guard or staying on guard against prejudice, bias, some fancy, some kind of questionable, judgment. That is ragadvesha. Therefore, if you exercise this, the most interesting and fascinating part about this verse is, it's not talking about to sit down and do something. It's talking about as you are meeting people, as you are, it could be any time and anywhere. While being under the shower, a certain fancy might rise in you about some matter, about yourself, some judgmental thought. Can you be free of that and see only facts? Or it could be a serious meeting of some sort, board meeting, some such thing. That doesn't matter. Anywhere and everywhere, you and I are likely to be swept away, to be carried away by certain fancy, certain questionable opinion. We get opinionated, about others and once more about ourselves too. Are we self-opinionated? Are we carrying an opinion that we are, of course, very pure and noble people? This Sthita Prajna Lakshanas, I am hearing for the 7th time, and I wonder how many here have heard so many times. And suppose one has some feeling of superiority. That is past. You might have heard 7 times, but you might not have got the message yet. Who knows? Somebody else has dropped in by chance, didn't want to come at all, but because the spouse insisted, you better come today, otherwise what? I won't tell you now. You have to come today to this lecture. And because the spouse said, you came here. But then, unexpectedly you say, hey, this seems to be interesting. And you might catch some essence. This person who has dropped in accidentally or in some, that person may catch, right? So, we have no business to imagine, because we have been studying Gita for many years, we are, as though clearer about things. We don't know. So, to stay in the state of not knowing, as they put in such literature, is meant, then we are sure to have prasad. Because a lot of our sorrow, agitations are born of continuous manufacture of opinions. We go on making opinions of people, others, ourselves, situations, things, and so on. Once more, to live properly, you need to have opinion based on facts. We are talking of being on guard with regard to opinions based on fancy, on bias, on some questionable ground, those things. And prasade, as we thus exercise alertness, watchfulness, and there is no mention of any compartmentalized, for 20 minutes do this. This is not a 20 minutes affair, etc. Moment to moment. And any time it is a matter of, at that moment, try. And some people have a problem, but how to be alert 24 hours, I think it's very difficult. To think like that is another problem. What is it, way to remain alert, so on. That is another trick your mind plays. Don't worry about extending, a technique to extend your alertness, etc. This moment be alert, whenever possible, wherever possible. Let me put it this way. It is not the length. Don't ask each other, how long can you stay alert normally? No, it's not the length. It is the depth or the intensity. For 2 minutes if you and I, when there is some agitation in us, let us say as an example, for 2 minutes suppose we are very alert, we may learn something about the self, our egoism, where we are hung up. All of us have hang-ups. So some long-standing hang-up might get exposed in 2 minutes of honest self-observation. And this 1 hour, 2 hour, etc. have no meaning. You should not worry about that at all. Moment to moment, in this prasada, serenity, all sorrow goes away, and his buddhi or her buddhi paryavatishtate. Paryavatishtate means the intellect or the mind here becomes more and more steady. And the whole portion is about steady understanding. Sthita prajna. Shankara says this paryavatishtate means nischali bhavati. Otherwise it is so chanchala. Chanchala, very unsteady. It becomes nischala, very steady. And he goes further, he says it stays as the pure self. That is the Advaitic flavor. Atmaswarupena nischali bhavati. Buddhihi paryavatishtate. Adi Shankara's comment here is, your thought or your mind stays very stable in the grasp of who you truly are. That self with the uppercase S. That is the word used in the Advaita system. And now couple of verses say, suppose we do not take care to ward off all these fancies, all this prejudice, all this bias. We might be great scholars, we may be very learned, we might have written 20 books. It is of no use. If we are not free of bias, then there is a big problem. Please see 66. Nasti buddhira yuktasya nacha yuktasya bhavana nacha bhavayata shantihi ashantasya kutas sukham nasti buddhira yuktasya indriyanam hi charatam yanmanonu vidhiyate tadasya harati prajnam vayurnavamivambhasi indriyanam hi In the Gita, at a number of places, the words yogi and yukta are used synonymously. In this verse we read, we have the word ayukta. Yukta means yogi, and what do both these words mean? United, well united. I would, in the context of what we have discussed, I would interpret it as we tend to be carried away by some memory, by some conditioning. In contrast, not getting carried away, we are well united with the true intelligence within ourselves, with the awareness, with the alertness. The Upanishads maintain that your true nature is awareness. There is the Taittiriya mantra, for example, Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. The word Jnanam there, pointing to everybody's true nature, stands for alertness, awareness. Your basic nature is awareness, but alas, you are so caught or so much trapped in thoughts. And alas, further, you get trapped in sense perceptions. Senses get tickled by something and you lose your balance. So, without getting lost in either sense pleasures or sense pain also, pleasure and pain, without getting caught in the network of thoughts, if you stay united to your own true nature, that is pure awareness, then you are yukta. And if you are ayukta, as the shloka says, ayuktasya na asti buddhihi. If you are not united, if you are not well integrated, if you do not know how to get back to simple, unbiased observation, which means if you allow yourself to be carried away, then there is no buddhi, there is no viveka, no discrimination of right and wrong. And when you are not united, there is no bhavana. Here bhavana technically means the ability to contemplate on your own true nature. In a manner of saying, it's not necessarily a prolonged thought process. Let me use the Sanskrit expression for you. Bhavana means Atmajnana Abhinivesha, is the traditional meaning given. Atmajnana is a certain insight you have about who you truly are. And Abhinivesha means holding on to it. So Ayuktasya na bhavana means if you are someone who allows yourself to be swept away by fancies, then to that extent you cannot hold on to the beautiful insights which you had gained before, which now also you are capable of. In other words, at any moment, you and I are capable of triggering, stirring or awakening a certain insight. Even as the old habits make us angry or agitated, we have the capacity to say, hey, wait a minute. Do I have to get angry? Somebody did not appreciate, let us say, something we said or did. We get upset. That's an old habit. Vedanta says it's not your true nature. But yeah, for a very long time you have been behaving like that. But doesn't matter how long you have been behaving like that, what is false has to end, and the best time is now. Like they say, a room which could have been in darkness for 20 years. When you walk in with a candle, when you walk in with a bright light, instantly the darkness goes away. Likewise, you may say, but this is how I have been. Don't count the long duration for which you have been like that. Is it true or is it false? Oh, this way of behaving is false. Then drop it. That dropping and staying as the intelligent, alert, observing awareness, which takes note of the criticism made by X, or the lack of appreciation, or the praise made by somebody else. It notes, but it stays well united with the awareness. That is Atmajnana Abhinivesha. That is impossible if our way is to saying one last time. Sometimes that's what we do, right? One last time I'll get angry. This fellow deserves a punch. One last time I will enjoy. People like me, diabetic, often make this mistake. One last time I will eat this, and so on. Eknath Ishwaran jokes. People say, one of these days I will give up all my bad habits. And then he remarks, alas, it becomes, this one of these days becomes none of these days. Gone postponing. From tomorrow, from next week, I am going to behave in a very mature way. What is all this? It's really very silly. But many scholars do this, leave alone those who have not read. So, the ability to let go of a habitual tendency and stay in the insight of your being free of likes or dislikes is bhavana. That would not be possible unless you exercise that right seeing. And unless you have bhavana, that contemplation, that holding on to your true nature in the Advaita Vedanta language, there is no peace, na shanti. And when there is no shanti, how can there be happiness? That is, if inwardly you are lacking in peace, there is agitation, there is conflict, there is a self-rejection, there is a sense of, I am not okay. Maybe that's your birthday and so many people have come with bouquets and gifts and everything to greet you. But you will not be enjoying. You cannot enjoy. I once saw a photograph, the lady showed me. Oh, last week Swamiji, this is my birthday and my children, and they didn't tell me at all. They gave me a surprise party. I didn't even dress up that day. Suddenly they rang the bell and all of them came with gifts, and then they took this photograph. See this photograph. And that photograph spoke volumes. All of them are happy and she looks very embarrassed. Because she... in fact, those relatives did not plan properly. They should have given half an hour notice at least to her. Or at least they should have given half an hour notice before the photograph. Because they actually coming like that embarrassed her so much, and she was very self-conscious. All these people have come. My children are okay, but the children brought another, some other, this little distant relative. Sometimes we draw lines. My children, okay, let them see me in any sari. But these, my son-in-law's brother also joined. In front of him, I should not be like this. One becomes so sari conscious and becomes sorry. So this happens. So we say, when there is no receptivity, the Shanti perhaps can be appreciated as a certain receptive mind, then na sukham. We may outwardly be celebrating, but inwardly we are waiting for this party to get over. Leave me alone, this noise. We all do that. Games that people play, I suppose there was a book with that title. We all say, thank you, how wonderful, you made my day, blah, 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 all that we say. But inwardly, I wish I had worn a better sari. And I wish these people had told me before. I'm waiting for all of them to go. Some kind of contradiction. We live in contradiction. Very learned ones among us also. Right? Why does it happen? Sri Krishna's answer, as I understand, is moment to moment we are not watchful enough. And lastly for today, please note, this moment to moment watchfulness does not, this I am repeating, does not mean you deny pleasure to yourself. It is not a call for asceticism. It's neither a call for becoming an ascetic, nor an endorsement of eat whatever you like, do whatever you do. Find out your middle path, enjoy life, but do not lose that self-awareness, do not lose certain alertness. Then you will find life is so wonderful. Let me pause here.